Looking out at a grey Michigan morning. April in Michigan can be full of sunlight and warmth, flowers blossoming, or it can be snow, sleet, rainy, cold. Out my window I see a grey sky, and my flowering apple tree covered with buds, ready to burst into bloom, needing the conditions for the blooming to arise. We're kind of like that. The conditions for blossoming are, let me say it differently, we are ready. The internal conditions for blossoming are there, but we also may need some light and heat and sunshine. What do we need? What do we need to awaken? We all have certain habitual patterns, karmic conditioning. I have a couple of things I want to try to tie together in this morning's instruction. I'm not sure whether they'll go together or come out as different pieces of information. Please take what's useful to you and leave the rest. If it's too many words, just drop it off. First, before we get into talking about karma and habitual patterns, I want to talk about the relationship between Vipassana and pure awareness meditation, which come together, but from different ends. Resting in awareness. Something will knock us out of awareness, some strong object. We bring attention to the object, and as it fades away, we relax back into spaciousness. With Vipassana, we start with watching objects arising and passing away. A sitting may be nothing but one object after another, including the contact and feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, then into mental formations, and no spaciousness at all. It just drops away because there's another strong object that comes, one after another. We can't force the spaciousness. When we practice with pure awareness, we create a stability of resting in spaciousness, which can make it easier to open to that spaciousness in Vipassana. The spaciousness is not like a mundane object. The spaciousness is what Aaron calls a direct expression of the unconditioned. So it's always there. We may use the other objects like luminosity, nada, energy. When we work with Vipassana with one of these direct expressions of the unconditioned, quote unquote, with one of these as the primary object, for me it makes it easier to see that vast field with the object arising and then dissolving. Spaciousness or luminosity, just resting there, and then another object. We go out to it. We relax just to this. Just to this. If it's intensely pleasant or unpleasant, we may get caught up in it for a few minutes. But eventually it dissolves and we come back to that primary object. That's Vipassana. With pure awareness practice, I'm more firmly resting in that spaciousness, so I'm more likely to observe objects arising and passing away. But I don't learn as much from the objects because I don't stay focused on the object. I stay focused on the spaciousness, or the experience of luminosity, or energy. I'm just out there resting in that, and here comes something, and it's gone. So there's no inquiry into what is it in the same way, unless it catches me and pulls me in. I find it best for myself to start with pure awareness practice because it settles my whole energy field. It invites me not to go after this and this and this, but just to rest, to relax, eyes open. Resting in that spaciousness. A sense of ease arises and joy. And then maybe, if you're sitting outside, and there's a thunderclap, boom, and suddenly raindrops. Well, it's a very solid object. Can spaciousness remain even with the thunder and the startled experience? Can spaciousness remain as you pick yourself up and pick up your chair or blanket and go inside, away from the raindrops, and then sit back in the window and eyes open, spacious, watching the rain, watching the spaciousness between the raindrops? So I like to start with Vipassana, with pure awareness meditation, and then I come inside and probably close my eyes, or if I'm inside, just looking out the window and then close my eyes, and come back to I'm resting in spaciousness already. That may be my primary object. For me, it would probably be luminosity, but spaciousness, not any of these objects. It may stay very still. I may be in such a deep place that there's very little awareness of anything arising. But probably there will be something. Hearing, touching, thinking, smelling. I'm sitting here with eyes open and watching snowflakes. Okay, snowflakes. When something arises, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? We begin to see the patterns we have of reactivity. Like I'm definitely contracting looking at the snowflakes. Yeah, I mean, enough already. It's April 22nd. Snowflakes. Contracting. I want it to be different. I don't want the snow. I want to get my garden in. Too early to plant the later summer crops. But things like lettuce and spinach, I expected to get them in this week. Last week, actually. Snowflakes, snowflakes. See it? Unpleasant. In this moment, is there anything really unpleasant about the snow? Except that it's not what I want in this moment. That's the only thing about it. I want it to be different. Certain pattern energy. Here, wanting it the way I want it. And if it's not the way I want it, I'm going to suffer. Because there's grasping. I want it this way, not that way. But all that's really happening here is seeing snow. In January, I would say, the snow is so beautiful. I love the snow. What's the difference? My expectations. when with the clear mind of Vipassana, mindfulness, seeing what has arisen with this pattern of the dependent origination, contact, consciousness, feelings, perception, mental formations. And I see each step of it. At any step, we come to what is called the active moment, the place where it hardens into habitual patterning. This pattern, I want it my way. Oh, okay, this is just a pattern. I don't have to take it so seriously. Hello, wanting it to be my way. Hello, have a seat, have tea. Here is wanting. How am I relating into wanting? Can it just be an energy, wanting? No. I wanting. Been expecting. Wanting. When I don't harden my energy field around it, I can begin to see and experience the spaciousness. I say see because I literally see it. But some of you may not see it. You may just feel it. Each of us has our own way of experiencing spaciousness. It may be as if a weight has lifted. Just more space to breathe. It may be, some people have told me that they have a scent that they equate with spaciousness. I've never experienced that, but that's wonderful. If you can smell spaciousness, great. Spaciousness. Spaciousness is not a thing. It's an absence of things. It's the space around things. It's the space between the snowflakes. I'm looking at it. It's coming down hard at the moment. If I look, I can see the space between the snowflakes. Am I going to focus on the snowflakes or on the space? Can I see both together? There are snowflakes and there's all the space between the snowflakes. Where am I going to put my attention? If I have a strong habitual tendency to focus on the snowflake, quote unquote, the thing, I don't like this thing, I want to control it, or I love this thing, I want more of it. If this is my habitual tendency, then I keep it building up more and more of a solid self, a solid ego. There's nothing wrong with an ego. It's a tool. But as soon as I become self-identified with this ego, that's a strong habitual pattern that most of us have. And there's a lot of suffering there. It doesn't matter whether it's snowflakes or news that I don't want to hear that keeps bombing at me on the television. Bombarding is the word I wanted. That keeps bombarding me on television. Or whether it's itching somewhere on my body that keeps bombarding me, or pain in my back. Each time it comes, if I harden around it, that hardening around the object, rather than softening and holding space, that hardening becomes the habitual tendency. It doesn't matter what the object is, but I will continue to relate to each object from that habitual tendency. If the habitual tendency I have is helplessness, oh, it's snowing. It's not fair. I can't control the weather. I can't control anything. Somebody yells at me. Another form of snowflake. They're yelling at me. I'm helpless. Poor me. The news comes in. I don't like this news. Why is this happening to me? Poor me. This is just another habitual tendency. On the other hand, I could have the habitual tendency of saying, it's snowing, so what? I don't care. He's angry at me, so what? Push it away, I don't care. News that's unpleasant. So what? I don't care. Another kind of habitual tendency. The habitual tendency itself becomes the predominant object if we will allow it. We begin to see how mind and emotions have used certain ways of being with the world to protect ourselves. We begin to see that it's creating suffering, that we do have a choice. When this is happening out there, I can relate to it with more presence, seeing it's arising out of conditions, and then it's passing away. I can choose to rest in the spaciousness, not to avoid what has arisen, but to deepen in wisdom and compassion. No matter what I do in the world, sometimes it's going to snow on my spring flowers. No matter what I do, I can't please everybody. No matter what I do, I'll never get everything finished. Certainly not finished to my expectations or others' expectations. Each of us has our own set of predominant ways of being in the world. It's what we do at Emerald Isle. Let's take us to Emerald Isle for a minute. To a warm, sunny day and a warm, heated swimming pool. And several hundred water balloons that people had filled over lunch. People standing in the pool, half the people standing in the pool, just standing there like this. I'll find some pictures and send them to you after at lunchtime. People just standing like this, eyes closed. People on the side taking a water balloon and throwing it. So it goes splat. Red, yellow, blue, green, orange, purple. Beautiful array of water balloons. Maybe one balloon hitting you, maybe several. Splat! Hitting here, hitting here. It's a light balloon. It's not going to hurt you. But suddenly, splat! What comes up in that moment? Think about it. What might come up for you? If you're standing there, you're expecting you may get hit by a water balloon. You know you're participating in this exercise, and it's voluntary. Nobody's forcing you into the pool. What comes up? When the water balloon hits you, we try to avoid being hit in the face, and throwing them more at people's chests and body, but occasionally one will hit you on the head. What is the habitual tendency? Is it going to be, oh, poor me, or fear I'm being attacked? Maybe it will be joy. Splat, how wonderful. Or, oh, I'm being pushed. Our own habitual tendencies. What comes up when you're the person throwing the water balloon? How does it feel to throw a balloon at something when you're at someone? When you're mindful and you toss it and you see them startle with being hit by it. So we begin to look in our practice at the habitual tendencies we have. we see what arises, and increasingly we become more able to rest in spaciousness, which enables us more completely to be with what has arisen without so many stories about it. Just this, just splat, just snow, just an ache in my back, just that. We watch how the stories arise, and we begin to see the spaciousness not as a place to escape from any discomfort with the object, but simply that the spaciousness is there, and it allows me a much wider field to be present with this object. I love Aaron's example here. He says, what if we were sitting in a small room, just 6 by 8 feet, a very small room, and he walks in with a tarantula in his hands. He just walks in and says, look at this, and sets it down on the floor. There's a door, or there's a low wall you can jump over. How long are you going to sit there with a tarantula? Not very long. I'd be out of there. Now he says, what if there's a 15 by 20 foot room? He puts the tarantula down in the far corner. So I know I'd be able to sit there until it's got halfway across the room towards me. And then I'd be out of there. What if he put it down in a huge gymnasium-sized room? Like 40 by 80 feet. It's in the far corner. I think it's 2/3 of the way across the room toward where I am. I can just get up and walk around to the other far corner of the room. Now he's over here. I can sit again and just watch him. Just watching this object. Tarantula. Tarantula. I do that for hours. I can see that as I watched him and really got to know him, and because I've had assurances that a tarantula is not a vicious animal, it will not attack me unless I attack him. So if I sit there and watch it, I can understand that with that spaciousness, eventually I'd be able to let him get close to me. In how many hours or days, maybe eventually I'd let him climb up on my lap and just sit there. I'd shudder with fear at first, but I'd also be able to breathe and feel the spaciousness and just let him climb up on my lap. Hello, tarantula. Eventually he'd get off my lap and walk away again. We learn to greet what were previously alarming objects with increasing spaciousness as we hold this balance of object and space. We can find this balance both through Vipassana and through pure awareness practice. One starting with the object and beginning to see the space between the snowflakes here. It's coming down pretty hard. Ooh, a lot of snow. My deck is turning white. Space. Snowflakes. Space. Not to avoid the reality of the snowflakes, but to keep the simultaneity. Snowflakes and spaciousness. Contraction. Aversion. I don't want the snowflakes, and it's okay. It's just snow. It will melt. We can come to it from the pure awareness meditation perspective. Resting in spaciousness, and the snowflake lands on your nose. What is it? Is there anything here that's not an expression of the unconditioned? Open opening our hearts to this snowflake, touching, melting, gone, opening back into spaciousness. So if I was sitting out there right now with a hat and coat on, and gloves, so just my face was exposed, I'd be feeling landing, melting, landing, melting. Where is the snowflake? Here it is, and it's gone. Where is it? Spaciousness. So this is how these two practices can come together. Now I want to take this one further a place, based on some of the questions we have had. When we have an ongoing reaction to something, like if I look at that tarantula and scream, even if it's 100 yards away, hardening myself against it. The way I react to the tarantula may be the way I'll react to other things too. Anything that I see as unpleasant, being unwilling to allow it close to my experience. The way I react to the pain in my back is probably going to be similar to the way I react to the tarantula. I'm unwilling to find any space with it. I just harden against it. This habitual characteristic, hardening, judging, turning on myself with shame or accusation, grief, feelings of helplessness, anger. Moving into a boisterousness. Me, I'm going to conquer this. Get out a big stick and kill the tarantula. Whatever her habitual tendencies are, we just keep them going. Vipassana gives us a chance to see it and to make a wiser choice. We start with a very profound intention to alleviate suffering for ourselves and for all beings. It comes from a deep place of love. This is why in many countries in Asian countries, they start with sila. There has to be a deep intention to non-harm, so that the Vipassana practice is not a practice of control, but the heart is involved in it. Really strong intention for the highest good of all beings, for opening to loving kindness. And then we begin to see the power of that intention to relate to the objects that are coming to us with a bit more awareness and spaciousness. And finally we begin to see the patterns that may link different parts of our lives. The one who always feels himself to be the victim, or the one who always has to be the one who's taking care of everyone and everything. You know, each of us has our own big bag of the stoop bag. What are the conditions that are so predominant for me? Freedom lies in beginning to see these conditions, these habitual responses, and find a different way to relate. Then in our practice, we can start to see new possibilities. Maybe I don't have to relate to this particular catalyst in the old ways that have brought suffering for me and others. I've talked about how when I first lost my hearing, I was devastated. I felt isolated and cut off. I felt helpless. I felt angry. And Hal was saying, poor me, I have a deaf wife. which brought so much anger. I couldn't find compassion for him because I couldn't find compassion for me. My Vipassana practice was essential to help me through this time, because I began to see anger and fear as objects. I began to see the sense of isolation and unworthiness as an object, and how these had been recurrent in my life. At this point, I was only 29 years old, but I could see how these had been recurrent in my life. Wanting to control, feeling unworthy. And then was able to sit with it each time that overwhelming feeling came up. Being with, as simple as being with a couple of friends having lunch at a restaurant. And somebody would say, one would say to the other, "Are you going to get the gazpacho or the chicken noodle soup?" Grasping would come up. What are they saying? What are they saying? I have to know. Seeing the habitual tendency in me to feel safe in myself by knowing and controlling. Very strong habit energy. Feelings of unworthiness and shame because I could not control anything. Sitting and watching that, opening my heart with compassion to myself, to this human who had such a strong karmic tendency to want to keep myself and others safe, feeling unworthy when I couldn't, working with metta, with karuna, compassion, opening my heart to myself so that there was a new possibility. So that, for example, one house said, "Poor me, I have a deaf wife." Anger might come up, but at the same time compassion for him, in which I could take his hands and say, "Yes, you have a deaf wife, and I am deaf. How are we going to make this work?" So instead of my energy being, my energy became, "Yes, together we can deal with this." This, in turn, created the very wholesome karma. 50 years later, 45 years later, I came into the room and found him lying on the floor. There was blood. He was unable to communicate anything to me. He was lying there on one side, holding up one hand, a beseeching look in his eyes. He couldn't say anything. And it was clear he had had a stroke. Well, the first thing I did, of course, was to go call 911, which I'm not sure I would have been able to do 45 years earlier. I would have run out of the house screaming, "Help, help!" Then I came back in the room and I was able to take his hand and just start chanting, "Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha," which he knows very well, that chant. Holding his hand and getting his eyes, and it quieted both of us. It was coming back to that same place. Together we can deal with this. We don't know what's going to happen 1 minute from now, much less a year from now. Right now, this is the situation, and we can greet it with love. And because both of us, karmically, had been able to shift from that place of anger and fear and helplessness 45 years earlier, we were able to use that wholesome habit energy we had established to open to a hard situation with more compassion, even though there was fear. To move past the power of the fear and into the connection of the loving heart. We talk about we use the term active moment. This is the point where it can go this way or it can go that way. when there's enough old habit energy that when somebody pushes you, you immediately punch back. It just keeps going that way. And then you keep getting punched back. Until at some point you stop and say, this isn't working. When I see somebody about to punch me, instead of punching back, can I just say, no, I'm not going to let them punch me. But to stop and say, no. I see that you're angry, and I'm angry. Let's just stop and hold space for the anger. Now, if it's somebody who says, no, I'm just going to punch you, it's mine to turn around and close the door. Make yourself safe. Now it's coming down in big, beautiful snowflakes. I wish I could show it to you. Like 50-cent silver dollar size snowflakes. It's exquisite. Thank you. So that active moment, we begin to really see the active moment, the place where our past conditioning has led us so often to react in one way or another way, and that it has not been wholesome, has not brought suitable results for happiness. We begin to see how much power we have to bring mindfulness and a loving kindness to the situation, and really to shift it into releasing the old unwholesome karma and opening it to a new and much more wholesome strand of karma. And that changes everything. This practice is so beautiful. And when we pay attention, not paying attention to fix things, but paying attention just because this is what we need to do. Paying attention not with a contracted, fixed energy, but attention with a loving heart. This too. I have space for this too. We open up this, Aaron calls it Awakened Heart. Some of you here are in the Awakened Heart class, different than Dharma Path class. We've been working with Aaron's book, Awakened Heart, which is freely downloadable from Deep Spring website. Some of you might like to take a look at it. The Awakened Heart, finding this heart that's truly awake within us and beginning to shift to release the old karmic tendencies, even releases too active a word. It's like the snow. If it hits something that's warm, it melts. It was falling from the deck, but it's not. It's hitting the deck and melting. Big snowflakes, but they're melting. Because the deck is, the heart of the deck is too warm. The snowflakes cannot find purchase on it. So they're melting. The snowflakes are going to fall. Can they not find purchase on us? Because we have so much loving kindness reading out of us that it just can't find anything to hold on to. This is the true healing. It's not really an active healing, it's opening it to the ever-healed. Opening to the one who was awake in ourselves, this one who knows, this one who loves. We all have access to that, and this is the beautiful place our practice can lead us. We have about 15 minutes, so I'd like to open this to questions. Sometimes if I am sleepy, pure awareness practice first is challenging as I can drift off. Do you have any suggestions? Ideally, pure awareness practice brings up a lot of energy. Your eyes are open. So for many people, there's more energy coming in. I'd like to suggest that you sit, do pure awareness practice, looking out a window, eyes open, seeing the interplay of tree branches and sky, for example. And I'll allow energy to come up. Just try that and see if that energizes you more. If you're very sleepy and you're still falling asleep with your eyes open doing this kind of practice, get up and do some walking meditation. If we could speak more about the awakened heart. Many of you may be aware of the term aggregates or skandhas. The aggregate of form, the mental aggregate, and so forth. Even the aggregate of consciousness. This body, this form, is not the same form it was even a minute ago, certainly not a year ago or 10 years ago. Mind is jumping around constantly. Consciousness is. Feelings are changing. As I watch these aggregates, there's a clarity. I am not my form. I am not my feelings. I am not my thoughts. I'm not even the flow of consciousness. I learned this with Aaron probably 30 years ago, sitting on a sand spit that goes out into Lake Erie, a Canadian park called Point Pelee. And there's this long, maybe half-mile sand spit that at the end is only about 20 or 30 feet wide and is constantly shifting, depending on the tides. Sometimes there can be big waves, like ocean waves. So I was lying. It was like this lake on one side, lake on the other side. And I was lying here with my head right there at the top, watching the waves, big waves, break and run up this slope and not quite touch me. Huge wave breaking, slapping down on the sand, running up. Certainly there was form there. Watching rise and dissolve, arise and dissolve. And Aaron occasionally reminding me, is there anything there but water? We can't deny the reality of the form, but essentially it's just water. After really understanding this with form, is asking me to look at my feeling, like a feeling of fear. It will run over me. I'll get soaked. Tension. Is there anything solid here? It's just arising from conditions and passing away. Watching it through several days, I spent probably 20 or 30 hours out there over 4 or 5 days, just lying on that sand spit, getting up and walking for a few minutes and lying back down again. There was such clarity, there's nothing solid. And yet these aggregates have a relative reality. Is there anybody who owns this form? These feelings, this consciousness. If I am not these, what am I? And doing, not just lying on the beach there on that sand spit, but also doing a lot of sitting meditation, going back off the sand spit back into the trees and meditating. Finally, the whole thing fell apart. Who am I? There was no longer any self-identification with any of the skandhas. And there was a deep insight into what I am, nothing I could possibly call it, just awareness, presence, love. This awakened heart. This is a powerful kind of practice. You don't need to do it with waves breaking. It was very helpful, and we've done that at Emerald Isle with people a lot. No, the form is just a wave. It's just the ocean. What is this emotion? What is this sensation? Who owns it? No one owns it. It's arising out of conditions. Then what remains? This awakened heart. I can't define it for you beyond that. Only we start to know who and what we are when we're not so busy being self-identified with all the aggregates. John, do you want to add anything to that? All the answers we might give you are just words. Trust your practice and take all of this back into your practice. You all can do this. If you're here in Michigan, go out and take a walk in the snow and let some snowflakes melt on your face. Impermanent. That's all.